Cleanliness and contamination control. Deck 2, gas tungsten arc welding stainless. So why does cleanliness matter with stainless steel? Well, when we're welding any metal, cleanliness matters, but stainless is another notch above things like carbon. Stainless is not like carbon steel. Contamination can cause corrosion, and heat makes the problem worse. So when we're preparing for TIG welding, cleaning, we got to get all the oil, grease, paint, crayon markings, whatever, corrosion, rust. It's got to be removed from the joint. The oxidation, the metal surface, and the distance beyond the heat affected zone. And if we don't get this, we can get contaminated welds and arc instability. A guy I used to work with who was like the TIG god, as far as I know, he was a guy. He was the man. But anyways, he said that when he'd have people bring him things to TIG weld, like stainless or aluminum, his question, they'd be like, it's clean. And his question would always be, is it clean enough that you would eat off it? Would you lick that thing? And if they didn't come back and say, yes, I would lick that, like it was a piece of silverware, because, silverware is stainless steel. If it's not clean like you would lick it, it's probably not clean enough to weld. And I know that's a, gross exaggeration, absurdist example, but it gives you an idea of, the level of cleanliness. I'm kind of a renegade in regards to, I like to weld with 60-10, and 60-10 is pretty forgiving, where you can weld over things that you can't with TIG welding. 60-10 and shielded metal arc welding is a little more forgiving. And especially, things like carbon steel, and if you're doing a repair weld on something, you can get away with things, but not with TIG welding. You got to prepare the weld joint. You got to clean it. So here's an example of what contamination looks like. So you can see that we've got rust after welding. Somebody here used a grinder or a wire brush that was either carbon steel or had been used on carbon steel. We can get discoloration, we can get heat tint, we can get pitting and surface attacks on stainless steel. So with stainless steel, cross-contamination is the big problem. Any kind of carbon steel contact, we can get contamination. And we get this from shared tools. You're thinking that grinder that you've been using, if you don't use the right type of grinding disc, and you use a grinder that has been used on carbon steel, you're just tracking all of that stuff and you're embedding it into the stainless steel. So grinding dust, it's bringing iron with it. So to get around this, if you're in some kind of stainless steel welding situation, you want to have dedicated tools that are only used on stainless steel. Your abrasives, your grinding discs, you want to make sure that they are stainless qualified materials. Your wire brushes and wire wheels, you want them to be stainless. Stainless only grinding discs, I said that. And then you want to have clean gloves and rags, and what you're utilizing to clean the weld joint should be dedicated to stainless steel. Surface prep before welding. We're going to remove the oil, the grease, the dirt, and we're going to wipe it with a solvent, usually acetone or alcohol. There might be other things, but these are generally the two that we're going to use. So you're going to clean that joint area thoroughly. Not just the joint, the area. Maybe an inch or so back from the weld joint. So you don't pull, when you're welding, you don't pull something into that weld joint, into your weld puddle. We got to do between pass cleaning. We got to clean in between the passes where we weld. So we put in the root, we're going to wire brush the root. Make sure there wasn't some, with gas tungsten arc welding, we shouldn't have slag. That should be the first thing. But you know, if there's some silica or some glass or something that floats to the top there, we want to get that cleaned out, you know, light brushing. And we're only using stainless steel materials when we're doing this on our brushes. Carbon steel, we use that, we're contaminating that weld. You won't be able to tell it for a while. It's not going to happen right now, but it's going to happen in the future, and it's going to show up as rust. And we want to keep our weld area clean. So our shop practices that matter, we want to separate stainless work areas from carbon work areas. And we want to avoid carbon steel dust. So a lot of times, you know, if you're welding stainless steel, you're going to have an area that is dedicated to welding the stainless steel. And we want to control the material handling too. You know, make sure that, like I said, everything stays, stainless stays on the stainless side and carbon stays where it belongs. So when we're talking about this, you know, if we're clean, we're going to clean in, clean weld out. If we're starting with the dirty weld joint and dirty material and contaminated material, we're going to have future problems. It might not fail, but we might have something like this that's a rust contaminated, a carbon contaminated disaster looking area. So with stainless, there's not a lot of shortcuts on this stuff. We got to act like grown-ups. We got to keep the stainless on the stainless side. We got to clean our weld joint before we start. And just generally act like adults and understand that we need to do this. Otherwise, we're going to be doing a lot of rework.